What's up, YouTube? Alright, I'm doing a quick update here of this WP shock that I'm working on the 89 ATK. I got to a point where there was a little trick that I figured out with replacing the DU bushing and also the dust seal, which is located inside here. And so, well, let me get the shock shaft out of the way. For the shock shaft, I just polished up the chrome and put a new bumper on it, so that thing is ready to go. May as well show you a couple other things. This shock body, the black part, I unthreaded from this housing, and there's a little O-ring that sits right about down here somewhere. And I cleaned out all the threads. They're really fine threads, kind of like over here. Cleaned all that up, put just one little bead of red Loctite around it, and then cinched this part, the bottom, the silver part, in a vise, like that. And then I clamped this and turned it in and put as much stank as I could put on it, which I would guess was about 70 foot-pounds. It's probably not enough, but I don't think it's going anywhere. I mean, I've heard you can put like 100 foot-pounds on it, but the trick is trying to hold this without marring it all up. And what I did was this triple clamp. It's an old triple clamp that the tab broke on the front and somebody re-welded it. So I just put it on a shelf. I haven't used it. But I noticed the bore, since this is like an early 90s, is pretty close to this. So you can see there's a little bit of a gap. And then what I did to fill that gap was I have a bunch of fork bushings, you know, just like those fork bushings with the Teflon coating on them. And so here is one that I spread out. I just hammered it over a really big socket and hammered all around the sides until it was nice and round. And then took a razor blade to all of that Teflon finish, because you want it to clamp. Sanded it. I mean, I spent probably 5 minutes working on this. And then you can see on this side I have another little shim, just a thin piece of aluminum. But when you put all that in there, it takes up the space. And basically it let me use this triple clamp to clamp around the tube, which you can see that is a ton of clamping surface. So once I cinched these two bolts down, that's basically just turned into one big wrench, and this thing didn't slip at all once I got the coating off of this. You can use whatever shims, but basically, if you have a triple clamp, they're not even hard to take off of a dirt bike if you have one that you think fits. You know, you just take this off and then undo the forks, undo your bars, and then pop the whole thing up. So you could even borrow it as a wrench. I think this thing is just going to live on as a wrench from now on. So anyway, that's how I got the shock body all put back in there. The O-ring was fine, so I dressed it up. Now onto the seal head, which is still really hot. So inside, you can see there's a rubber little dust seal. That would be, I think, this part. It doesn't make sense to me because this part looks too skinny, but maybe when you put it in there it spreads out. I'm not sure. I won't be surprised if this is the wrong part, but for now I think it is. And so nothing goes in on this side. It all comes in on this side. And that is the first thing that is in there. You can see there's just a little rubber seal. The next thing that goes in here is this part, which looks to me, sorry, my glove's in the way. Looks to me like the DU bushing fits inside there, And then that is just a big collar, a steel collar. And this is the part that you need to watch for wear. That little circular ring. Sorry, I can't point with anything. There we go. That little impression right there, that is a very critical clearance section, so you need to make sure that it's flat, that the O-ring hasn't worn a groove in that, because you're not just going to sand that out. I guess you could, but then you would have to space this out as far as what you took off of it. So basically, this really needs to be in good condition, and you got to be careful not to booger it up when you remove it. You can get another one of these made. Kelvin at Cycle Shed Racing said he can lathe replacements for these, but they're $75. So just try to take it out without messing it up. He described to me his process. I used kind of a modified version of that. So let's see if this is still hot. Nope. Okay. So, is this great camera work or what? So this presses all the way in there. And the trick is, you've only got that little nub sticking out about 1.5 millimeters. And there's not really much to pull on. And then on the other side, there's obviously not a lot of room to get in there. So I used one of these bearing pullers. You can get them from Rocky Mountain. Let's see. So here's what the kit looks like. They've got all different sizes. This one was a little bit too small. Once you fully tightened it up, it just didn't have enough grip. This one was a little bit too big, which is why I have that worm clamp on there, because I had to cinch this thing down as hard as I possibly could, and it barely fit. And so now it's in the fully cinched down position. And what I did was I slid it through here and was able to get through, come on camera, there. I was able to get all the way past this seal. I don't know if you see it, just barely gets past there. And so when it's bottomed all the way in there, you unscrew this, then you can tighten this thing up and get it to really bite solidly on what would be this. So the flange spaces out and you can get a good grip on here. Then I used the socket and slipped it over the whole thing. And I put this whole apparatus, just like that, into a big C-clamp. So I don't know if you can kind of get the impression here of what I was doing. So I had this all set up in a C-clamp. God, this thing is still hot. Kind of like that. Only this would have been spaced out a little further. I mean, what a great video, huh? Anyway, you get the impression. This is all in the clamp. And then I tightened it up. Once you make sure this is all flared out, you're past the seal, you're on that bushing, you got as much bite as you feel comfortable with. Tighten this up, and I had some pretty decent pressure on it. Then you stand the whole thing up, and I just used a little propane torch and just went right around this whole seal right here, the seal head, which I don't know what you call this. Man, this thing is still hot. I didn't think I got it that hot. Anyway, I just worked the flame all the way around it, and as I worked around it, you could hear it. It would just pop a little bit, and pop a little bit more, and that was a really good sound. It's just pop, 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 because it's relieving all that tension by pulling this out. And so I gave it just another little turn, and now I got it stuck in there again. But anyway, the whole thing just popped out. So, wow, God, that is still hot. It's amazing how hot this thing got. So now that came out, that dust seal is, it's just finger tight. You can get a screwdriver now and push the thing out. And now all you have to do is separate the bushing from, God, this is hot too. Sorry. I did this like 10 minutes ago and I didn't think it was still holding this much heat. So now I just have to pull the bushing out of here, which isn't nearly as dramatic now that you've got it out of this aluminum housing. So to reinstall, if this is actually the right dust seal, you just figure out which way it goes in there. I assume it goes metal side down. I think you would want that to go in first. Just put a little lube on it, use some kind of a tool to push it in and bottom it out. You have this rebuilt with your DU bushing, and then opposite would probably work pretty good. I think I would heat this thing up, make sure you have a little lube on it, and use a C-clamp or something to slowly press it in. You probably don't want to be hammering on it, again, because this surface you want to keep as nice as possible. Now this one has a little corrosion on it, but you can see there's no cupping. The O-ring has not worn a groove into it. So this will be good. Anyway, this is going to be a tricky part when you go to rebuild your shock, and I just wanted to share with you something that worked really good for me after I messed around for a few hours and figured it out. Peace.